Hey guys, sorry about this. This could not be helped. Hit me with a +1 if you can hear me and see me properly. Okay, let's see now. I'm bringing on Andrei. Andrei, how's it going?
Oh, it's going fine.
Yeah, sorry about this. Chat.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's not your fault.
No, it's very frustrating, these kinds of little snafus, but they're inevitable. And in fact, this is the first time that this has happened in 19 broadcasts. So, it happens. Anyway, while we're waiting for Pepe to hop on, there's Pepe. So let's see if the sound is. How's the sound working now? I can hear you, Pepe. Go ahead. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, fantastic. It's working now. Yeah.
Okay,
I think, you know what? I think somebody was listening to the podcast in another device. This happens.
Yeah, that could be the case. Yeah.
Yeah. It happened many times when I'm doing podcasts with, Yeah.
What do you mean? Somebody else was listening to it?
Somebody got the hold of the private link. That's what most likely.
Yes, it could be. It could be. It could be. Yeah.
That's weird.
It happens a lot.
Really?
CIA. It's CIA or Mossad. So,
it's the usual suspects.
Yeah. So really, yeah.
Well, cheers to the chat for coming back on.
Cheers to the chat. You bet.
Yeah.
Are we back? Are we live again?
Yes, we are live right now.
We are live.
Yeah, so hell with it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So sorry about that.
Sound is perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get cracking. Because we want to get everybody in because Andrei has to leave in an hour and 75 minutes, as a matter of fact. So let's get as much as we can into the show. Now, what I wanted to start with is, what are your thoughts insofar as the Kherson offensive? Because I posted a video this morning, and I was of the opinion that the Zelensky regime talked its way into this August offensive, that it was ill prepared for, and now that they're in it, they're like, they have to keep on throwing troops into this meat grinder. And I think that this might be a disaster. What are you guys thinking?
Well, it is a disaster. And do not forget that after tomorrow, they have this so-called Rammstein format meeting where the way Western type strategy operates, you need to show something to get something. And obviously, it's a Pentagon-driven affair, really, this Rammstein format. And judging by the puffed-up statements from all kinds of bizarre people like Scholz and, what have you. Reality is, of course, that strategically it's already a complete failure. Their losses are appalling on the Ukrainian side. And what we can say now, they lost roughly, killed and sanitary losses altogether, and the size of a division.
How many is that? How many is that?
Tentative data from what I heard from Podubny, Evgeny Podubny, who is one of the very few reporters who I trust.
Yeah. Reliable.
Yeah, reliable. The rest of them are just basically a bunch of the military porn peddlers. But if you look at what he stated on the 4th, by the end of the 4th, Russian Defense Ministry was already given more than 3,000 killed and more than 7,000 sanitary irrevocable. So we're looking at around 10,500 casualties in 4 or 5 days. So it's a division, 2 brigades. And it continues, nonstop. And he will be throwing, and not only it's not just him. We're obviously looking at Bojo. We obviously look at the Biden administration and those so-called Pentagon and London military professionals, quote unquote, who won't fight their, way out of the wet paper bag. But they are such a great operational planners. I'm being sarcastic, of course. And there you go. That's what we have.
I didn't realize you were being sarcastic, Andrei. Pepe, what do you think?
Exactly what Andrei said. I won't interfere with Andrei speaking straight from the Delphi Oracle about everything that's happening in Ukraine because he's unassailable. What I wanted to do in our conversation is something completely different. Maybe if you allow me.
Floor is yours.
Is that if you allow me, what I've been doing these past few weeks, and especially today, because it's all interrelated to what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Eurasia as a whole. Today was the beginning of the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok. Very, very important. If you do not follow what they discuss in Vladivostok, you have no idea what's going on in the bigger Eurasian picture. So I spent the whole day tracking the best roundtables, including one on the SCO, which was an absolute cracker. You know, I will have to work like hell to get the best quotes from Chinese, Russians, Indians, and another one on sanctions as being completely pointless in terms of forcing any nation into submission. Yeah. And you have the excellent example of the DPRK, North Korea, where they have been under a regime of sanctions that is absolutely, it's the harshest anywhere. And they still make ballistic missiles, and they still have a nuclear power. So, and they haven't bowed down to everything that the Americans were forcing them to do. So this is the kind of discussion that you can have in a forum in Vladivostok, where they are discussing not only investment in the Far East, but the reorganization of the Russian economy and how the Russian economy has been withstanding all sorts of pressure, and it's as solid as ever, which is fantastic. And you don't hear this only from Russian officials or a guy from Novatek or from Rosatom. You hear that from the Vietnamese ambassador in Moscow, for instance. You hear that from Indian scholars. It's fascinating because you have a cross-section of the relations between, for instance, the SCO and the Eurasian Economic Union with ASEAN. They have 2 or 3 roundtables discussing relations between Russia and Eurasian Economic Union, with ASEAN and with Vietnam specifically as well. You have discussions about, there was a roundtable that was an absolute cracker with Maria Zakharova, obviously the star of the show, talking about the information war. And her conclusion was quite perceptive, which goes against the grain of a certain idea, even in Russian circles, that Russia is losing the information war. Basically, she was saying no, because their information war, they didn't force us to do absolutely anything. We're doing everything that we set out to do, and 85% of the planet agree with us, essentially. So this means you are losing the Twitter war. You are losing the social network war. You are losing the war where a bunch of idiots, or like Andrei would say, nullities from everywhere, opine on sociopolitics, on military matters, and they don't know shit about anything. So yes, Russia is losing this war. And Russia is losing the war in Washington and in Brussels, because we know exactly who's running, or who are the messengers running the show for the real masters in both Washington and Brussels. But I was startled because it's absolutely impossible to have a conversation at the very highest level anywhere in Europe, not to mention Brussels and all the other capitals. In Washington, in the Beltway, of course, absolutely impossible. So, and there were practical solutions, like, for instance, how they are going to develop the Northern Silk Road, or the Northern Passage. How there is a collaboration between the Russians and Chinese to do that, interconnections between the Belt and Road and the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And obviously, of course, it was this SCO debate was excellent as a preview of the SCO summit, which is going to be in Samarkand next week. And that connects to what I was doing this past 4 weeks. I was in the heart of the heartland. I was on the road in Samarkand and Bukhara, especially, and in the surrounding countryside. as a preparation for the SEO summit, of course, and something that I couldn't do during COVID. I needed to spend at least 1 month in Uzbekistan to see how one of the most important Central Asian nations is developing at the moment. And it's organizing their foreign policy with Pakistan, with Afghanistan, with Iran, with Russia, with China, and especially in a country that now is under an economic boom that started only 3 years ago. Can you imagine that Uzbekistan opened up 3 years ago? So my first impression when I was leaving the Tashkent and getting on the road, I said, "Wow, this looks like Vietnam in 1994." So the Asian boom of the tigers that you have in Southeast Asia in the 80s and early 90s, now you're going to have at least in 2 or 3 of the Central Asian stands now. It's fascinating to watch this now. You know, finally, it's like the let's say. For the moment, an incipient, but a return of the heartland to the heart of history in Eurasia. So obviously, it's going to take me quite some time to digest everything that I saw, which was, and from an archaeological, architectural, cultural point of view, was absolutely mind-blowing. Because I took a lot of time to talk to local people. So I was talking to artisans all the time, you know, ceramists, you know, people who work in wood, carpet weavers, you know, these people who are artisans who in the West, what they do in Central Asia is disappearing. This artisanat, this savoir-faire is disappearing everywhere. And it's very much alive in Bukhara, in Samarkand, like it was 2,500 years ago. Or when Alexander arrived in Samarkand, he said, "Wow, it's more beautiful than I even thought." So, you know, so this is quite something. So now I'm still trying to present. I'm talking this to you guys and to our audience, just to give an idea that when you're exposed to so much information condensed in a short period of time, and then you connect to the bigger picture, geoeconomic and geopolitical that is happening across Eurasia, then you start marveling at the whole theme of a new world is possible, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly that Russia is just pivoting decisively towards Asia, and as I understand it, there was basically as I understood it, basically a threat from Lavrov, basically saying, if you Europeans continue messing with us, we're going to cut off all trade with you.
There are different layers. I would love Andrei to go for it quickly. Peskov said specifically about Nord Stream 1 is that nothing can be done with Nord Stream 1 because they are not respecting the technicalities because of sanctions. So it's not our fault. So if they get rid of all those sanctions, everything will be working normally because, for instance, the turbine that was returned to Siemens, Germany, which is controlled essentially by the Americans now, it's not controlled by the Germans, should have been returned to Gazprom for maintenance. So this, you know, it's something very, very straight to the point. And of course, Russian officials from Gazprom had already said, look, the problems are technical. And obviously, if it continues like this, there's nothing we can do about it. So Peskov left it on a limbo that it can be interpreted like a threat, but it's not a threat. It's a state, the state of things.
There was new information today that Lavrov said, not about Nord Stream 1, but he was saying
so Lavrov, you mean in the past few hours?
Yes, in the past few hours.
Okay.
Andrei, do you know about that?
I don't know about Lavrov, but I saw today Putin with Shoigu and Chief of General Staff Gerasimov at Vostok 2022, which of course depleted and out of personnel and ammo Russian armed forces conducting
I heard that.
And it's 52,000 personnel of just a Far Eastern military district, together with obviously China, you know, India and Vietnam and Azerbaijan and, you know, all kinds of people there.
Algeria.
Yeah, Algeria. Yeah, well, absolutely. And you look at their mood, you already can see, and that wasn't any kind of official type, broadcast. It was somebody doing the, photo thing, just on the
Yeah.
phone. And yeah, then good. Putin was making jokes about Yevkurov, who was giving a report to Gerasimov. So it's like, yeah, you can see that. And what I wanted to say is, we need to understand the fundamental of what is going on. Russia started talking from the position of power now. They did. That's why they squeal like pigs. They don't like it. And the point is, culturally, civilizationally, if you wish, modern Europe as it exists right now, it's been written off. That's it. There's nothing to talk about. You want to buy some stuff or lift sanctions, sure, but civilizationally, there is no wider gap than it is now between present day Europe, its elites, and Russia. They're just civilizationally incompatible because, and I'm on record for many years, actual West, the Western civilization now, is surviving in Russia. The Europe is not Western civilization anymore. I don't know what it is, and some people will say, oh, it's a natural kind of, result of where they were going. Maybe. But the fact is, they do not fit even the mildest description of what Western civilization is. If we take even Roger Scruton, definition, it is post-Christian, it is irrational, it is ideological driven, and it's totalitarian now.
Yeah.
So show me any signs of the Age of Enlightenment there. Zero.
No, I don't see any.
Well,
You're
yeah,
absolutely
the fact is that we have illiterate people. And again, Annalena Baerbock or Scholz, or what is the name of this semi-bald dude from Brussels, Michel, or they are illiterate people.
Borrell, the stupid Catalan.
Yeah, and then of von der Leyen. I don't know. You know what? I never heard about the specialty, a profession called automechanic gynecologist. You either or, and you of course can do, automechanics, as your hobby. But basically we're talking about a complete implosion of the Western elites.
What I find funny is that the whole point of the sanctions was to crush the Russian economy, so as to create popular discontent that would overthrow the Kremlin and Putin and have them replaced by a Western-friendly regime.
Oh yeah.
And the funny thing that's happening is that because of the sanctions, the European economy is imploding, and it is the popular discontent that is arising in Europe that is destabilizing the political elites in the West. And so ultimately what you have is a boomerang effect where what they wanted to happen to Russia is actually happening to Europe. And as I understand it, on the 1st of October, the Germans who have announced this, it's official, they are going to be deploying soldiers in German cities to maintain order.
Yeah,
that's totalitarianism, man.
Well, yeah, it's 1984 all the way. It's 1984 all the way. And again, I've been on the record for so many years now. We're looking at the incompetence across the board. It is military incompetence. Quoting Michael Hudson, great Michael Hudson, what they teach is economics in the West is not really economics. They teach bookkeeping, which is good. You need to be a good accountant, but they teach finances. They don't teach what real economy is, how it operates, how it produces things. And when you have, let's say, US Congress, 90% of which are people with the degrees in political science, which is not a science really, and you have lawyers, what do you expect? You get what you get. And
yeah, Pepe, you're in Europe, so Pepe, what's the vibe?
No, it's horrible. I'm back in Istanbul, and I'm back in Europe this weekend, and but I'm already booking my flight out, so I don't plan to spend more than a week in Paris because I know exactly what I'm gonna see, and I'm gonna be basically exiled in my own home, and I have nobody to talk to apart from my wife. It's absolutely impossible. The last dinner that I had before I came here and then went to Uzbekistan, I abandoned the dinner because I didn't want to cause problems.
Why? What,
You know,
what was? Please tell us
it was,
specifics.
I was trying to do at basic my basic conversation everywhere I go, trying to explain why the SMO is happening, and trying to explain NATO against Russia, trying to explain indivisibility of security, trying to explain the absolute mediocrity of European elites, and try to explain why Europe is going down. And obviously, if you try to do this on a dinner in Paris, they think, of course, you know what's going to happen to you. So
Yeah.
you
Putin
might as well get a
Putin
good
shell.
bottle of Margot and tell them to, which is exactly what I did in the end. So, so I'll be back to Asia after a week in Paris. But something that complements what Andrei was saying. If you understand how Brussels works, how that absolutely Kafkaesque bureaucracy of the European Union, and especially the European Commission, with 27,000 at least bureaucrats in that enormous Parlement building in Brussels, with the color-coded dossiers on everything about cow's poo and whatever. and all exactly, and trying to
it's true, that's the worst part.
Of course it's true. I saw this for years. My base in Europe during the war on terror was more Brussels than Paris, because I had friends working at the European Commission, so I got an inside view of how the European Commission works. And I would say from 2001 2002 onwards, the big thing was we need an energy policy. Those evil Russians, it's horrible. We need to get together and get our European energy policy. They never got an energy policy, because the energy policy was made for them by JP Morgan and US investment funds.
Yeah.
So the energy policy came from Wall Street. And what is this energy policy? You have to get rid of fixed contracts long-term with Gazprom. You have to go to the market. And who controls the speculation in the market? Them. So obviously, these stupid assholes from Estonia, Latvia, the midges, the Polish, Jesus Christ. These people bought the thing. The guys who are elected internally as commissioners, for instance, the current energy commissioner at it's Franz Timmermans. He's an absolute idiot. Like you had people in the past in the European Commission who were they have a relatively decent IQ. For instance, Pascal Lamy for a long time. Then they start getting Barroso, which is borderline, you know what, nah? And
I'm demonetized. You can say whatever you want. Don't worry.
You're demonetized. Okay. So anyway, and von der Leyen from Lugen Presse, the only thing she does is to lie. She was basically chosen by the JP Morgan crowd to implement exactly what they're doing now. And what gets much worse is that this collusion between the leadership of the European Commission in Brussels and the German government. And then you have von der Leyen basically telling Scholz, Habeck, and Annalena Grune what to do and what to say. If you look at it's exactly the same press release, and it's the press release by Wall Street. So anything that happens, so if what they're doing with Nord Stream 2, which cost a bloody fortune, which they asked Gazprom to build, and now it's blocked probably forever. It's over there. You switch Nord Stream 2 tomorrow, that's the end of the energy crisis in Germany.
Yeah,
no.
Of course.
And Nord Stream 1, as we all know, it's a technical matter now, because the maintenance is not being done like it used to be. So now you lose both. And but this is the dream scenario for buying energy at the spot market from speculators who basically pick up the phone and call Wall Street and say, look, there's an asshole here who wants to pay 3,000. Okay, sell them for 3,500. That's what it is.
Yeah. And the thing that I believe, and Andrei, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe and I've been saying this publicly on a previous video that I posted today, is that even if the EU suddenly held its head and said, "Oh my God, what have we done? We've ruined our economy," and they crawled back to the Kremlin saying, "Please, please, pretty please, turn on the gas again," I don't think that the Russians would do it. I think that they would just
Oh no,
come up with an excuse and say no.
no. Russia is making a killing selling whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't understand that. No, I mean, they begin to. When I look at those so-called economists from Wall Street Journal, it's hilarious, really,
Yeah.
you know. And then, of course, you have this neocon crowd, which are imbeciles, basically, you know. Neocon has to be a euphemism for imbecile, you know. And the point is that you look at these people and it's like, are you for real? And obviously the fact is, again, the break up with Europe as it is, with the institutions of Europe, is civilizational. In other way, Russians cannot tolerate the smell of those people, you know, and on their almost DNA level, there is nothing in common in human sense between what Russians are and, you know, and that is why there is while Russians certainly are not, you know, cruel people, they understand that there could be some suffering and they regret it, but there is no sympathy anymore. There would be sympathy. There would be sympathy 20 years ago. They would be saying,
Sure.
oh, yeah. In 2015, Russian Air Force was dropping bombs which had written on them for Paris, you know, and they were dropping them on the ISIS in Syria because of the, number of the terrorist attacks in Paris and Nice and what have you. It's not the case anymore. You asked for it, you got it. Live with that. You know, just hey, read your what's the name of it? The Iron Curtain is now being built really by Europeans themselves, and Russians are happy about it. You know, so there you go. And again, if you look at the Russian Constitution, it's everything what makes the European and Western elites in general completely crazy, going bananas, you know, and there you go.
You know, Pepe?
Yes. What can I say? I'm going to go to Paris and have another dinner, which I'm going to abandon, you know. So it's Groundhog Day, you know.
I know that
there's something even worse. There's something even worse, which touches on the abysmal non-quality and negative IQ of all the social, political, and financial elites in Europe at the moment. What's going to happen in Italy in the elections later this month? I think it's September 25. Giorgia Meloni is going to be elected as the first female prime minister in Italy. Mm-hmm. The problem is, everybody thought that Meloni was anti-NATO, she was anti-Brussels, she was a real Italian nationalist. So what happens? Meloni, Salvini, and Berlusconi, they wrote a sort of charter together, basically gobbling up all sorts of excrement directed at them by NATO stuff. So what are we going to have? We're going to have another NATO puppet in Italy, slightly different from Draghi, because according to a fabulous definition by a guy from her party, Fratelli d'Italia, he said, why she's going to be elected? Because she's blonde, blue eyes, petite, and very funny. And that's it. and this in Italy, wow, this in Italy is like being Miss Universe. You know, everybody goes for you. You know, blonde, petite, and funny. Fantastic. And she has a,
so she's basically an Italian edition of von der Leyen.
No, because von der Leyen is thicker than any doorknob on the market, especially thick, fabricated in Thailand. So, and Meloni is very smart. In fact, you know something very interesting. Businessmen from the Veneto or Piemonte or Lombardia, Milan, the business capital of Italy, and Italian business expats the ones I talked about in Asia these past 2 or 3 years, they are all Melonistas. They're all Melonians. I know she's going to be great. She's going to resuscitate Italian business. Obviously, this was before this charter with Salvini and Berlusconi. So nothing is going to change essentially in Italy. So they were going down with Draghi in terms of the destruction of Italian workmanship and the Italian working classes and the middle classes. But with Meloni, is going to be with a sort of Berlusconist TV talk show element as well. So there's no way out. And when you see that some of the best critical intellectuals in Europe, they are in Italy, and you never hear about them because they are completely exterminated from mainstream media, which is basically a Gianni Agnelli operation, like the Agnelli family, which is one of the most repulsive dominant families in the history of the planet. In fact, they control basically La Stampa in Torino and La Repubblica in Roma. So the two top newspapers in Italy. And most people, they read these ones, and the other smaller papers, they reproduce what is on La Stampa or La Repubblica. So there's no way out. And then you see these brilliant guys with small channels on Telegram or writing for a really nice small channel on Telegram called L'Antidiplomatico. And you have professor of philosophy at the University of Milan doing an absolutely devastating analysis of the Italian non-system at the moment. And he's read by 10 people. It's very, very frustrating. Very frustrating.
Yeah, and my thinking is that, see, the people don't know, or let me phrase that, the mainstream media is not telling anything. It's all just bullshit. And so the vast majority of people, and let's be sincere, the same happens to us three, that, most people, we just scan the headlines and we're like, oh, okay, that's more or less what's going on over there, And so they go by the headline and the first paragraph, and they say, well, if everybody's saying this, then it must be more or less accurate. And of course, they don't dig in. And what's remarkable, and I do not understand this for the life of me, is that the people that I thought were intelligent observers of reality and who were open to new information, it's like COVID. They just accept what they are told, and they do not deviate it, not by an inch. And insofar as what's going on here, they insist. I've spoken to some people in the United States and in Europe, people whom I consider very, very intelligent, very capable in their respective professions. They refuse to accept that, number one, the Russians were justified. Number two, the Russians are winning. Number three, these people, the Zelensky regime, they're completely corrupt. And what they're doing is, I would say that many people would call it evil, insofar as many of the things that they've been doing. They refuse to accept that. They refuse to accept new information. I find that deeply troubling. Something happened. I mean, they put something in the water. Something happened that people no longer accept any kind of dissident information. There is a class of people, a subculture of people who do, such as chat, you guys who are here. I mean, obviously you're on board with what we're telling you about reality, but nobody else. And frankly, sometimes, and I don't know if it happens to you sometimes I wonder to myself, hey, am I wrong? Am I the crazy one? Because it's so pervasive, this nonsense. And they do not seem to understand that the catastrophe that's about to befall Europe is of their own making. They did this to themselves. Who was it? Urban, who said that, no, you didn't shoot yourself in the foot, you shot yourself through the lung. Yes. And I find it tragic because I'm a man of the West. I grew up with Western values. I was educated in the United States. Obviously, you can tell by my accent. And I believed the Western democratic values. And I see, number one, nobody applying any kind of critical thinking. Number two, they are throwing away like confetti the basic rights and freedoms that we have enjoyed. And I find it just heartbreaking. I mean, and Andrei, to your point, yes, it's looking like Russia is the last bastion of Western civilization.
And then we have to keep in mind, which, again, it's the problem which probably requires, although I wrote about it for years now, the modern world, its politics and its economics, its technology, its military, everything about it became so complex that suddenly those institutions, be that Ivy League, and I spoke, and people write me all the time, as I always say, you know what, in the United States, you want to have a chance of some kind of rebirth and producing statesmen as opposed to politicians, which is another euphemism for being corrupt. You have to abolish all those liberal arts, departments in Ivy League and reconstitute them on completely different, those people, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And the only thing they can follow, first, you're right, there's something in the water. They definitely got their IQ dropped, by I don't know how many points. But secondly,
at least a standard deviation.
Face the fact that when you talk about modern things, modern economy, modern industrial economy, make no mistake, modern industrial economy, it is much more complex and difficult to run the manufacturing company, which produces something from the electric kettles, let alone to commercial aircraft. It requires a lot of expertise and experience. Look what happened to Boeing. Boeing was obliterated by 737 MAX, And look when it happened. What's the name of it? McInerney or whatever the hell the name of the guy. The first CEO in Boeing's history who didn't have aeronautical engineering background. He was MBA. He has exactly. In 2005, he stated, "We're not gonna run Boeing as the engineering company. We're gonna run it as a business." And guess what? He was the guy who gave the go to the 737 MAX.
Yeah.
And we know what happened, That's exactly what happens right now on every single level, starting from the White House. When people say, well, I'm not going to be expanding on Mr. Walking Mummy, and because there's nothing to talk about. The guy is it's really abuse of the senior citizen. As much as I abhor Biden's family, and I think so it's criminal clan most likely. But point is, Joe Biden should be in the senior housing, assisted living right now. And yet we have the whole half of the politicum basically abusing their old and demented man. But then again, go back to Trump, and I understand MAGA, I will kind of, rub the MAGA crowd, wrong way. But the guy was an empty suit. He was a freaking, he was a freaking, he appointed Mr. Mad Dog Mattis, when you read, just because he looked good in the goddamn uniform.
And he talked really deep.
It's like, okay, why don't we invite, call up the clowns, for crying out,
They did call up the clowns.
Yeah, there we go. And they would say, oh, things do not work. They don't. That's the whole point. They don't. And one of the major reasons is because they don't know how things work. They don't know. They are completely lost. I look at these people, those American generals who lost every freaking single war ever existed, in the history of the United States. And this is amateurish, sophomoric crap they spew, First, I understand they are so losers, and when they look at how the proper wars are persecuted by real professionals, apart from the fact that Russian history of the combined arms operations dwarfs whatever the United States ever had in history. But then they begin to spew some things which, like, you begin to scratch your head and it's like, what did they command? I mean, I don't know.
And the worst thing is that they are commanding by wire the Ukraine armed forces and leading them into disaster. I mean, Andrei, do you know information about this, like hard information or reputable information as to the control that the Pentagon is exerting over the Ukraine armed forces?
What basically is well-known fact right now, it's accepted as a common knowledge in Russian sphere, and especially Russian professional sphere, is that United States and especially British, well, that's another great combined arms operation country.
The dumb leading the dumber.
Direct control. And fact is, for example, this debacle in the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, It was planned, people say openly, and it's a MI6 and SAS
It's an
operation.
MI6 operation. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a known fact. Those people, as I already stated, they can kill the Skripal cats. That they sure can do. They might organize their provocation with the chemical weapons. They might know the technique of raping women and killing children. They are not capable to fight peer or better than peer enemy because they don't know what it is. Listen, it goes much deeper than mere, for example, probably professional inadequacy of the Sandhurst or whatever is happening in West Point, which is horrendous. We're looking at people, for example, the cadets in the West Point who are accepted there while they cannot pass the lowest grade test for the enlisted people. And this is the future officer corps. It's like...
Also, you have problems with, like, for instance, affirmative action.
Affirmative action, yeah.
Now you have people who are incompetent but have the right skin color. And
imagine yourself being some kind of like Ben Hodges, which is, he's clinical, really. Or whatever, Petraeus, the only achievement of Petraeus was screwing this by far not very attractive woman.
That's the sin.
Yeah, it was the thing about exactly tell me, what is his record on winning, conducting, planning operations against serious enemy? Not the guys in the goddamn sandals and turbans in AK-74. And then they begin, oh my God, they use artillery. Well, yeah, that's what real war is. You kill enemy, you exterminate it. That's actually Douglas McGregor wrote an excellent article in 2011 in Time magazine. He was basically criticizing what superfluous U.S. Marine Corps. And there in the last two paragraphs, he beautifully described what real war is about. It's not about running with the gun, and attacking some height. No, it is about standoff weapons, starting from artillery to cruise missiles to what have you, fire impact, whose only task is to kill as many of you as possible. It's a slaughter. Warfare is a slaughter. And that's why I read those veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq like, oh my God, we're combat veterans. Really?
Really?
Yeah, go try the real war and see how you will, stack up against that. And that's the whole point. You have people who they never had a clue about it. They love to bomb their...
Sorry about that. Hang on. That's me. I'm going to mute myself, but please continue. I'm going to move to a better location, but I'm hearing you.
Okay. So, and that's what it is, basically. So,
Andrei, I followed both of Petraeus' surges in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was there on both occasions, and it was a joke. It was a joke. The whole plan, of course, his Harvard MBA sort of planning for war, and the way he discussed with local tribal Pashtun chiefs in Afghanistan and local very hardcore Sunni chiefs in the Triangle of Death, Ramadi, Fallujah, and Baghdad. And it's very, very funny because later, when my local handlers would take me to talk to some of the sheikhs, and they talked to me because I was not American. So they received me like one of them. I say, we remember the Brazilian team in 1962. I remember 1982. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And you used to sell weapons to Saddam. Very good. In fact, Brazil sold a lot of weapons to Saddam in the 70s. And then they would say, look, this idiot, he comes here. He thinks he can bribe us with a bloody Samsonite, and he's going to buy the allegiance of our tribe, our clan, to fight a war for them in our land.
Yeah.
Fucking joke. Which goes to the essence of American planning in theaters of operation, which is something that none of these assholes have read Lévi-Strauss in their life. They don't understand the other. They don't even try to understand the other and the local conditions. And send an anthropologist to talk to the imam in that Taliban village. And the guy writes a report to us. And then we're going to learn in which kind of language code and cultural code you can approach the Iman. This is how it works. It's basic, but they're incapable of doing that. Absolutely incapable. In Afghanistan, in Iraq, they were in their bubbles, completely isolated from everything. Even if they were in the middle of the desert in Helmand, they were inside their garrison, which they never left because they knew that if they leave, they will be bombed to smithereens. And in Iraq, absolutely the same thing. They were very good in terms of exterminating Fallujah at least twice, like reducing Fallujah to rubble at least twice. They perpetrated a Guernica in Fallujah in late 2004. It's one of the most horrible things that happened in terms of modern war. It was beyond absurd. And obviously this was, I remember at the time, New York Times, Washington Post. This is our greatest victory in Iraq since the day that we hired some assholes to take down that statue in Tahrir Square in Baghdad.
Yeah.
You remember that, Andrei, right?
Yeah, of course I do.
No, I mean, like to what you're saying about, like, for instance, bringing an anthropologist to talk to the local population and then giving a report to the military so that they would know how to handle themselves, right? Well, unfortunately, and to Andrei's point, anthropology has been ideologically captured for decades now. And so,
that's Andrei's true. Yes.
Yeah, it's what Andrei said sort of like would defeat your very sensible plan, of course. And the funny thing is that they keep talking about multiculturalism and tolerance. But the thing is, see, they don't respect other cultures. It's just
no.
Yeah. And any culture that does not like McDonald's and doesn't want to drink Coca-Cola and doesn't want to watch Netflix, they think it's wrong somehow. And instead of trying to negotiate some sort of modus vivendi, it's just destroy.
It's much worse, Gonzalo. It's incomprehensible.
Yes.
It escapes their mental coding and that little window through which they see the rest of the world, which is basically, in their opinion, a collection of barbarians. With very few exceptions. Yeah,
it's this weird neo-colonialism and they don't even realize it. They think that they're the good guys.
Well, the Pentagon had early 2000s the so to speak human terrain program. The human terrain program was designed to kind of provide some kind of the insight into the local cultures. But the problem when we talk about this is the fact, if they cannot goddamn get the real situation about Russia, the only country in the world which can wipe the United States off the map in 20 minutes, and they still don't get it, despite the fact of the Russian study field is absolute disaster. It's a wasteland of the crap, lies, myth, and obviously cheap account settling by primarily dissident Soviet and Russian, largely Jewish and other communities. So they couldn't get that, which was into your eyes, basically, in the front of your face. How they gonna get some country like Afghanistan? Apart from the fact that, of course, the Russians gave them advice when Russia did support U.S. operation in Afghanistan to a point, including through supplies, including from the advice, military advice, and even working together with the Drug Enforcement Agency. There were joint groups and joint operations against drugs in Afghanistan. All wasted. Of course, they shut down also the human terrain program because obviously there was some pushback from them, obviously having some remnants of scientific integrity, anthropological and cultural community. But there you go. And yes, can you imagine explaining to people, and again, I have my litmus tests, so to speak. For the country which considers General George Patton, to be one of the greatest, it's like if you have the examples and idols like that, then no surprise, you cannot win any goddamn war you fight. And even, so it's just like I don't know.
Andrei, I thought Patton got all the way to Moscow. That's what Netflix
Oh yeah,
told me.
no, I mean, Jesus, I have the, you know what? When the Soviet former naval officer, cadre officer, has to explain to some American fanboys that actually Operation Cobra was planned and designed, the breakout from the Cotentin Peninsula, breakout in Normandy by the Allied troops, was basically planned by none other than Omar Bradley. And they say, no, it was, it was Patton. I said, Patton was nobody. He was just army commander. He did as was told, basically. And then, of course, you begin to explain to them, bring up the history. The guy fought his Lorraine campaign. He faced in the Lorraine campaign in 1944, before his debacle at Metz, which he couldn't take. He faced the whole 3 Panzer divisions, them from the one of the Southern Army groups. I don't remember the number of the army group. Each Panzer division had each 10 operational tanks per division. So he faced in all 30 operational tanks of Wehrmacht against his army.
Yeah, well, what happens is the American intellectual class pays attention to movies, and they don't actually read the history. They don't do the work. Yeah, I mean, Patton was the movie Patton was a fantastic picture.
Oh yeah, George loved the guy. Oh my God.
No, of course, because the screenplay was by Coppola. That's why it was brilliant. It was one of the best screenplays.
It was a brilliant movie, and it's still enjoyable 50 years later. But it was a movie, and it was overly simplified and glorified one guy who was just part of a team. They don't. It doesn't enter. And anyway, what I wanted to turn back to a little bit is the situation on the ground in Ukraine, because obviously, for obvious reasons, I'm very concerned about it. And, how do you see this playing out long term? I'm not asking you, either one of you, to tell me, which battle is going to be won tomorrow. But I was talking to Mark Sloboda, who's a very intelligent man, and he was thinking that the Ukraine situation was going to be a forever war, that basically eventually Russia would wind up taking the entire country, but it would be an endless policing operation because the West would be funneling weapons to Ukraine, to the resistance, quote unquote, and that it would become like Syria. What's your idea about
an Afghanization of the war? Yeah, I wrote about this last week.
Yeah,
there are 2 scenarios: Afghanization and Syrianization. And now the scenario that NATO and the West wants is Afghanization.
And can you explain that, please?
Exactly like the jihad in the 1980s in Afghanistan that lasted 8 years, which was a war of attrition. In the end, the Russians say, okay, we had enough, we're leaving. In the minds of those subliterate planners in the Pentagon, this is what should happen. And they're going to have, instead of the Arab Afghans, like a Jihad International, they're going to have a sort of neo-Nazi international with lots of fanatics from all over. Very easy to recruit, like we've been seeing. Very easy to be exterminated as well. But this is going to be their shock troops without the need to insert NATO troops in the battlefield. This is what they want. The Russians know this is what they want. And obviously the Russians will do everything to prevent that from happening. So I'm very, exactly, I would love to have Andrei's take, because it connects to one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, Andrei, which is what would be in military terms after we go, let's say we are on stage 3 at the moment. So let's say when we get to stage 4, the major prize is going to be Odessa. So how would the Russian general staff would organize a play for Odessa, not using, of course, the Black Sea? So an overland play to Odessa.
It's in the plans, from what I can understand. And obviously, I have no access to Russian general staff, and I, as anybody else, I use the open sources, but organization-wise, we have to understand that what we observe right now, and as Mr. Khodakovsky, one of the commanders of one of the brigades from the Donbass Republic, militia, he stated, even if we would be staying in the same place, not moving anywhere, Ukraine would still lose. And they are losing because at this stage, again, it's a classic demilitarization issue. And the militarization issue is annihilation of the both mobilizational potential in two forms: the war material production capacity and personnel. So, and considering the number of the KIAs and losses on the Ukrainian side, which are horrendous, and people in Pentagon know this, and that is why they are absolutely, in a state of shock. It will continue, and we already now, from what we hear from the different news and sources, including Podubny, including even the official sources, number of the troops already cannot even basically fight. They are basically literally cannon fodder. They go in, many of them are drugged. They use the drug cocktail. So we already can see a precipitous, in the last months and a half, to precipitous decline of the quality of the troops. And the only reason they are not surrendering in larger quantities, albeit still many of them do, is because, you literally have their basically Nazi police, military police, because they execute from they executed 100 Marines from one of the armed forces of Ukraine brigades. About months ago, they simply shot them in the front of
3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and so it's like, if Pentagon wants to be involved with this kind of planning first, as I already stated, they cannot plan a crap, basically, And fact is, as I already, when we talk about Afghanistan, there was a very specific way the exit from Afghanistan was handled. And when you look at this, Odessa is next. After that, there will be regime change. And we, of course, I can only dream about to have at least 1 millionth part of knowledge what, for example, GRU and SVR know, and what Russian Defense Ministry know, and how they essentially report to Vladimir Putin, Supreme Commander, and Security Council. But obviously, it's not like breaking point. The armed forces of Ukraine already do not exist as organized force. What they have the some remnants of the military hardware and some remnants of the mobilizational potential of people up to 70 years old. And now what? We have women allowed to be drafted, women, including pregnant women. So, and in this case, Russia has all the time she needs and all the resources to continue this, because although there are obviously losses on Russian side, we're looking at a kill ratio which is unbelievable, absolutely incredible in favor of Russia. And Russia can continue this for a long time until basically, the whole thing just simply disintegrates as such. And again, do not forget, whatever NATO wants, but once, and I think so, the foreign minister of Hungary, let alone Viktor Orban, who speaks to Putin and to Lavrov, and there is a lot of discussion, obviously, on what parts of the Western Ukraine will be appropriated by Hungary, for example.
By Hungary,
And if Poles would be smart and less, hostile, they would have been granted basically what they want to do. Now, because of the arrogant behavior, Russia will make very difficult for them to still get what they will get in the end. Everybody understands. You want to Lvov, you want to, God bless, take it, But the question is, we should look at it on a much larger framework of the ultimatum of the December 2021. And the fact that Russia doesn't fight Ukraine there. Russia fights NATO. And we have to look at a larger issue of strategy real strategy, which is again, and I sometimes prefer to listen not even to Sergei Lavrov. There is a man in Russia who is second most powerful man in the world after Vladimir Putin, and the name of this man is Alexander Novak, who is the Russia's energy minister. And the guy who, with the single word, can basically, if need be, he can destroy Wall Street, really, if he wants to. But Russia is destroying Europe as such, which happens now, And the fact is, we can talk about technicalities, but technicalities are merely casus belli in economic sense. Economically, they wanted economic war with Russia, they got it. And we are only what? September 6th? Wait until October 6th. We'll talk then. But this is what the framework I'm looking at it. And so in this case, I can see no further than at this stage, Russia will take whenever, whatever the months will take, Odessa, make the land bridge with the Transnistria. And after that, the forces which are already at work, the drivers of the geopolitical balance, which are not only military, but primarily economic, they already continue to do their thing, so to speak. It's like antibiotic or poison, if you wish. You introduce poison, slow acting poison, let it act. And we are seeing this now acting out. And this is just the warm-up.
Exactly, which leads me to another question for you, Andrei, which concerns, let's say, stage 6 or stage 7, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
The denazification of the Baltic midgets.
Yeah.
So we know it's in a sort of limbo, but it's going to happen. It's absolutely essential to denazify this new Iron Curtain. And of course, this includes the 3 Baltic midgets.
Yeah.
You guys think that the Russians are going to take over the Baltic Chihuahuas?
No, nobody needs them, really. But look at this.
But the problem is they need to be denazified.
Denazified, yeah. And they called, for example, such thing which is called UAE, United Arab Emirates, isn't it? Russians called those 3 Baltic states Vimirats, which is, of course, their Russian version of Emirates, but Vimirats in Russian means dying out. And so basically they are United Baltic Vimirats, because if you look at their demographic statistics, it's terrifying. The population of Lithuania shrunk 2 times already since the mid-90s. They literally shedding population, and most of it goes to the west and disappears and gets,
assimilated.
They later become the advisors to Pentagon and State Department, and the cycle of the idiocy continues because they are there to settle the scores. Others clean toilets, what have you, But we're looking at the situation for that those non-economic entities will cease to exist as such because they lack their basically demographic resource, and there is no real economy except for some agriculture there.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically 3 principalities. 3 principalities of Russia.
They're statelets. Yes, they are statelets. And at some point of time, it's already started. It manifests itself as some kind of the feudal, fiefdom, basically. That's what they are. Russia will wait, and continue to apply pressure until they simply die out economically. They didn't mind, that Russians get persecuted there and treated as the second-hand citizens. Well, there you go. You will be treated. Putin is on record. The same with Lavrov. Russophobia is very expensive.
Yeah, well, Pepe, to talk about your point about Odessa and what will happen in the medium term, if you will. My thinking has always been, and Andrei, you're a military guy, but and I'm not, certainly not, but I've learned quite a bit over the last 7 months or 6.5 months. My thinking is that Odessa means so much to Russia that I don't think that they would dare to assault it per se, but rather just surround it.
No, not an assault. It's from the inside. Absolutely.
Oh, from the inside.
It would be a Troy scenario. Absolutely.
Yeah. And don't not forget,
the political leadership in Odessa would be pro-Russian and sort of like
they would have to count on a fifth column inside Odessa to do it peacefully and without alienating the Russian majority population of Odessa. Very, very.
Well, I can tell you from obvious firsthand experience that here in Kharkov, that is the big bugaboo, because there is the perception in the Kiev authority that half the population in these regions where I'm at are basically fifth columnists, and they're not wrong. I mean, the people who have remained in Kharkov, in the city of Kharkov, where I am, they're mostly pro-Russian. Because the people who are pro-Western or pro-Ukrainian, ethnic Ukrainians, they left and they have not come back. When I arrived back in the city on the 1st of March, the city felt empty. I mean, I would say that 80% of the population had fled, but there has been a steady return of a lot of people. And I see them on the streets, and I can sort of distinguish between Ukrainian and Russian. I speak neither language, unfortunately. And I can tell that they're all Russian speakers. And the fact that they are here when they can still leave, that indicates to me that it's become basically a Russian enclave. And all the people who are not on the Russian side, if you will, they've left and they are not going to return. I know several people personally who will not return. And I know other people personally who did return and intend to stay. So I think that that's the direction of travel insofar as the city of Kharkov. That's why I'm not thinking that there will be an assault on the city. I mean, first of all, it would be militarily very, very difficult. You'd need hundreds of thousands of troops, I would guess. And the fact is that there is a huge segment of the population who is not on board with the Kiev regime. And that's why the SBU is cracking down all over, left, right, and center. And that seems to be what's going on here in Kharkov. So what you're saying about Odessa makes a hell of a lot of sense, to tell you the truth.
Plus, do not forget, architecturally, Odessa representation, it's not only, it's a Russian empire, which is, you saw, well, Mr. Potemkin, Catherine the Great, the whole thing. Architecturally, Odessa is wonderful, it's beautiful, the center is gorgeous, and there's so many, historical things there, which really tied to Catherine the Great and Potemkin and, Deriba's admiral. So it's, it's the same like Hitler didn't want to take Paris, really, in terms of, destroying it. Even that guy, he understood the value of Paris then for, the same as for Rome. And for Russians, Odessa in this respect, obviously, it's historically, culturally, it's the same as Sevastopol. It's ingrained in Russian psyche. Yeah, and it's very difficult to foresee Russians, planning to take it by their purely military means. There mostly will be some kind of special operations. It doesn't mean that there will be no shooting and there will be no attacks on some things, but obviously, especially Odessa's historical center will be preserved at any costs, basically. So that's what I can tell you for sure.
Well, I got a beautiful USSR Odessa pin from one of my connections in Bukhara, an old school guy who had a fabulous collection, pro-USSR, who told me in his own words, Putin was right. It was really a disaster. We lived much better then. And he was living in the middle of the heartland in Bukhara, which was completely neglected. But Tashkent, of course, was the fourth largest city, was very important for the USSR. But Bukhara and Samarkand, they were left to rot practically. And they had supporters in the middle of ancient Timurid Central Asia. Fascinating. So I wish I could show you the beautiful Soviet Odessa pin, which I'm going to use in Paris, and I will be immediately shot in the middle of the
street. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's. But yeah. You guys basically, I think so. We are pretty much on the same wavelengths here when we talk about Odessa. It's what happens after that. And there were already reports really that they have been moving well, you wouldn't call it even troops anymore. It is indeed cannon fodder. It's the people in their 40s, late 40s, 50s, they moved some of the troops, and they're moving them also to the west, closer to Lvov and closer to the Banderistan, real Banderistan, and Kiev. And again, Russia is not going to touch Kiev militarily, at least not now. And because, it's kind of, but Russians, in terms of Kiev, they do not have this attachment as they have to this old, what is called Russian Empire, Tavrida. It's called Tavrida, which is,
exactly, the Taurian lands, absolutely.
Yeah. And you look at this, Odessa, Nikolaev, all those cities built by, those during the Catherine the Great, including, of course, Crimea, Sevastopol, and all that. So that is in Russian psyche. Kiev, if they want to have Kiev, let them have it, but we don't know. I don't know what will be the size of the romp which will be left.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
But I think so. Afghanization is a wet dream, because let me tell you, the most powerful and potent weaponry against Afghanization in Ukraine. Of course, they don't know what Ukrainian mentality is, but I'll give you example, it's a real example. It's the real deal thing. During the operation of returning Crimea home, obviously, which was practically bloodless and was beautifully done, many Ukrainian service people, especially military doctors, military naval nurses, and people of this nature, they were obviously allowed, hey guys, you want to go back to Ukraine, just be our guests. Here's the the train going out of Simferopol, and here are the buses, definitely, and we will allow you to come back, sell your apartments, what have you. So it was very, very humanitarian, very nice. And so what happens, they get this, and this is not anecdote, this is not bar, short story to impress. This is how it happened. And so they go out. The buses were, provided by the Russian Defense Ministry, and all those doctors, nurses, and other personnel, they load onto buses with their some possessions to, go to Ukraine, to their relatives, and then deal with this situation later. And somebody gets their basically the list of their salaries, which Russian naval doctors and nurses receive, and what they will be paying once those people will fill in the positions in the, for example, main hospitals in Sevastopol, especially the largest, naval hospital, on the what is called ship side, Корабельная сторона. Well, guess what? Many of those people, when they saw those salaries, they say their loyalty to Ukraine evaporated pretty fast this way. Yeah, many just. Yeah. Hey, you know what? No, it's fine. We can live with Russians.
We can live with our oppressors.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Buses left semi-empty, So and many. So there. This is. You know what? There is no fortress which can defend against the jackets loaded with gold. And knowing Ukrainian mentality. And knowing, they do not forget, many of them, they still think that Ukraine is prosperous European country. For many of them, when they get to Russia, I'm not talking about Eastern Ukrainians, but they get to Russia, let alone they get to Moscow, St. Petersburg, Sochi, they experience the shock of their life. Russians live not simply better, Russians live much better than they ever would dream. And now when the people, let's say in Mariupol, not only they get Russian pensions, they get, those one time or several times support money. It's like There you go. And this is the most effective weapon. And once you have population which largely supports you, or at least neutral, and don't want to mess with you because they begin to live better, you know what? Any partisan movement depends on the local population supporting it, and majority of local population supporting it. Otherwise, it doesn't work. But those people in Pentagon don't know this. And I made a video about this resistance operations concept document written by one of their, special forces guy. You open the table of the content and you begin to look at, oh yeah, partisan movement in resistance in France in World War II. Or like, okay, guys, where is the partisan movement in Vietnam? Where's partisan movement in Yugoslavia? Where's the partisan movement in the Soviet Union? How do you want to learn the historical lessons when you basically study nothing on which it's based? And these are the type of the people. Lieutenant General Schwartz, the chief of the European Command of Special Operations. It's like you read this, it's 180 pages of delirium, and kind of random facts from philosophy, from something. Where is the analysis of Vietnamese? The guys, it's like, how do you go to learn if you don't analyze and don't learn those things? About Russians in World War II, Great Patriotic War, take the history of the Belarusian partisan movement. It's like they don't even bother to study it.
No, and also the fact is that they don't seem, the Western big brains in the Pentagon or in Brussels, they don't seem to understand that the Ukraine population is an urban population. So those kinds of clan ties that happened in Afghanistan, where the resistance was really clan-based.
And
then extended families, where there was a sense of belonging and the clan itself was resisting. Whereas in an urban environment, frankly, a more alienated environment where the individual feels more alone because of industrialization, well, he's not going to have that sense of personal loyalty that he has to take up a gun and fight against this quote unquote invader, especially if the invader treats him nicely, gives him a good salary, and doesn't want to screw with him.
Exactly.
He's going to be perfectly fine with it. And so my thinking is that, the more you think about it, the possibility of some sort of, Afghanistan type insurgency is fantasy land, because it's just a different people. And it goes to the fact that these big brains in the Pentagon and Brussels, they view people as cogs in a machine. They don't seem to understand that the cogs have very, very different shapes. And you can't simply take out one cog and replace it with another. It doesn't work that way. It's much more complex. And the situation in Ukraine, I would say, from having lived here off and on for the past 10 years, I can say pretty definitively that the chances of there being a real organized partisan movement is next to zero. And the potential partisan movement was already partisanized, if I can invent a word, with all of these, Right Sector Battalion, Azov Battalion, all of these extremist groups that were already organized and which the Russians are systematically destroying because they're really going after them. And so it's sort of like, it's not going to happen, it seems to me. Pepe, what do you think?
Guys, I have to be leaving. I'm sorry, guys. I have an appointment at 12. Okay.
Do you still have 5 minutes, Andrei?
5, yes.
Right, because I would like to hear from you the connection between what's happening in Ukraine and the bigger picture, which is Russia back at the center stage of international relations, Russia as the most important, let's put it, emerging nation, but on the top tier of the emerging world, and recognized by 85% of the global South. And what are the ramifications in short and medium? An unalienable fact And for the NATO stun leadership, this is beyond anathema. This is a humiliation that they cannot simply endure. What they're going to do as a Samsung option. But now it's inevitable. It's the confluence of the Russia-China strategic partnership, the emergence of Russia trying to establish a new paradigm in terms of international relations, and the fact that the global South basically is in. And this is what one instance of we're going to see next week is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in Samarkand next week. That's why it's so important, because you're going to have 25%, 40% of the world population, if you get everybody sitting on the same table: Russia, China, India, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, the other Central Asians, and Iran as the new member. And they will be, the key of all the discussions is going to be how we're going to, from an Eurasian framework and point of view, how we're going to reorganize the planet against the hegemon. So how do you make this connection between Ukraine in, let's say, in the micro picture, and the SCO, Russia, China, and Eurasia in the macro picture?
Very simple. The combined West have been deindustrializing and financializing itself for a long time. So the collapse, technological and economic, is already happening as we speak right now, actually. And there are many signs of this, and I'm not going to be going into this, but it's all fits well with the issue of the correlation of forces, but not only just military forces, but economic forces. And when you look at the somebody said, I don't remember who, that Europe has to decide if it's going to be the part of Eurasia or it's going to be a peninsula of no significance for the Eurasian mass. Economically, Eurasia, starting from the western border of Russia, is already much larger than Western economies. Most of the Western economies, bar some exceptions here and there, are finances and capitalization of the blowing and inflation of the assets. Again, people sometimes don't understand. China produces 3 times more cars than the United States.
Exactly.
25.7 million cars against 8. And United States is the biggest car producer in the West. Japan comes next, and then Korea, and So economically, basically combined West, especially Europe separately, they're becoming a pipsqueak. They could sell their standard of living and culture in 60s, 70s, 80s, and there was a reason for that. It's over. It's over. That's the whole point. And Russia is the pivot, not only geographically. Russia is in charge of what matters most for this emerging Eurasian huge economy, and whatever it's going to be. I don't know, somehow. But Russia is the military pivot because it's the one who is actually providing the military security, not even China. China knows it. China is there.
And the Chinese know it, exactly.
Chinese know that. And that's what, and guess what? Once you got there, basically, the realm, guess what? You control the realm, So that's what it is. That's Russia's role. Apart from the fact, let's face it, I am on record for now 5 years. Russian economy is actually much larger than the economy of Germany. And some people have to really start, again, let me put it this way. If Germany would try to produce something, single submarine of the Yasin class, or create their space program Russia has, Germany's economy bottom will fall off, So that's the thing, which plus, and here's the most tremendous fact, which they don't have. Russians begin to live better than Europeans now. That's the thing. And it's for them, I know, for them, it's excruciating. So, guys, that's my statement. Pepe, I'm sorry. I hope I said it properly.
No, it's wonderful, Andrei, in your inimitable style, of course.
Oh no, it's pleasure talk to you guys. Pepe, you're gonna be probably writing another review of my book, but I have to get to it.
It's like write a book because I'm already starting the review, but I don't have the book.
But yeah, my publisher, when are you gonna write it? No, let's SMO kind of come to more or less, and then we can start speculating. Okay, guys, gotta run. Pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Pepe,
Take care.
pleasure talking to you guys. All right.
Enormous pleasure.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Chat, hit a +1 for Andrei. Hit a +1 for Andrei, chat. It would be great to send him off because later he can check the chat and see your approval of him. So Pepe, yeah, this is what I was thinking from the very beginning of this. Certainly, I was talking about this in videos in April, May. My thinking is that the Russians are going to wind up taking over the whole country, and they will.
It's exactly. It's more and more graphic in front of us.
Yeah, and they'll take over the whole country. And my thinking is that they'll take over and integrate into the Russian Federation everything on the Black Sea. Odessa.
Well, that's a given. No, that's. I think we all agree. I think every analyst agrees that Ukraine has lost. Well, first of all, they lost the Sea of Azov, and they're going to lose the Black Sea forever.
Yeah. And my thinking is that what they'll do is that they'll have like a rump Ukrainian state that they will puppeteer. And my thinking is that Lviv or Lvov, as the case may be, will become like this weird Western Ukrainian statelet that will be like Poland's Vietnam. Hear me out. This is my thinking, that the Russians will deliberately make an effort to push all of the extremists to the far west.
Absolutely.
And that this region in the west will just fester. It'll be an open wound, but it'll drag down Poland. Because my suspicion is that, and I can't shake this feeling that the Russians will be smart insofar as the Poles are concerned, who lust after Lviv and Galicia, dangle it in front of them and say, here, take it, but then push all of the extremists into this region who will start making trouble for the Poles. Do you think that this is reasonable, or you think no, it's outlandish?
No, it's spot on, because I already read something, not from the Polish aristocracy, but by some Polish dissidents, in fact, saying we are going to get into a trap. We're going to re-annex Galicia. We're going to re-annex Galicia, which is what the old Polish aristocracy, imperialist, etc., wants. The people who basically taught Brzezinski. Brzezinski was born in one of those families, in fact.
Yeah.
And they're going to get a bunch of neo-Nazi fanatics.
Yeah, that's
absolutely. But there's no question about that. Obviously, if we are discussing this means that Patrushev and company already thought about that before us.
Yeah, they're 3 steps ahead of both of us. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, because it makes sense, doesn't it?
The problem is, Gonzalo, the problem is how this rump Ukraine will be militarized from a NATO point of view. Because assuming we have a post-Stoltenberg that is not as thick as himself and Rasmussen, who came before. I used to call Rasmussen fog of war, Andreas fog. Rasmussen. Absolutely. In fact, he's still worse than Stoltenberg. Stoltenberg is just a doorknob. Rasmussen is a doorknob with a dagger, very, very dangerous, very dangerous. And then if we have somebody that starts to, look, we lost. Like we lost in Syria, we lost in Afghanistan, we lost in Libya, so we lost in Ukraine as well. And they say, okay, and obviously there's going to be an arrangement between the next American president, assuming who gets there. If who gets there, he's going to strike a deal with Russia. There's no question about that.
Yeah, he's a deal maker.
If, of course, if it's another Republican, according to my Republican moles in the Beltway, they say no. There's gonna if it is a Republican president, there's gonna be some sort of deal, of course. First of all, they are going to be completely unmarked from what they say is the Biden crime family perennial disaster. So there's got to be a rearrangement of foreign policy. And classic conservative Republicans, they are not warmongers like these Trump neocons, the neocons that went to the dams, and the think tank gang in Massachusetts Avenue in Washington that writes policy for these guys in Capitol Hill and for these assholes who publish op-eds on the New York Times and Washington Post, foreign policy, foreign affairs, all that shit, So there's going to be a change. And obviously, the Russians know that as well, because the Russian embassy in Washington, which I had the pleasure to visit once, is a minefield of intelligence. It's a marvel of it. It's like a mini KGB in DC. They know everything. It's amazing. Sure. It's absolutely amazing. So obviously, of course, and they have very good contacts, especially with Republicans. Obviously not with neocons, and obviously nil contacts with the Dems. So this means that the guy who's they're going to put in NATO post Stoltenberg is going to be a more accommodating category. Anyway, he doesn't design policy. These policies are designed in Washington. Yeah. The problem is what the Poles themselves would do apart from NATO. Don't forget that the EU, the mechanism of the EU, is unraveling completely. So NATO may not unravel, but the EU will. We still don't know the time frame. We know the EU will collapse within the next 2 to 7, 8 years.
Depending on how bad the financial situation is, that means
we're going to see when General Winter knocks at the door soon. We're going to see what's going to happen. Exactly. If it's total chaos, then the EU could even unravel next year. We're going to have 3 or 4 countries going to say, no, we're out. And of course, because they know that the euro is already unraveling.
Toast.
We see it every day. The euro was supposed to be a strong dollar or a dollar 2.0. No, it's already unraveling because they know that they have an economy who is unsustainable and cannot buy influence with what they produce anywhere anymore. No. And it's going to be, on top of it, is going to be deindustrialized serially from now on, by their own mistakes. So 1 year in geopolitics, as we all know, is an eternity. So lots of things could change. But our analysis at the moment of what the Poles would like to do, it's going to be a trap for them. That's for sure. And then they're going to say, so how we are going to militarize the re-annexed Galicia ourselves? We are broke. We're going to be out of the. We're not going to be protected by NATO. We cannot invoke Article 5 against Russia, and Russia doesn't give a shit about Western Ukraine anyway.
Yeah,
they practically gave it to us. So it's fascinating to
because
the possibilities.
My thinking is that, see, if I were Putin, I would be thinking to myself, I'm going to be taking over all of Ukraine, and NATO is not going to stop me because, of course, Yavoriv, that strike scared the hell out of NATO, and they're never going to put boots on the ground.
No, they won't. They were scared to death with that strike.
And my thinking is that if I'm Putin, I say to the Poles, hey, look, here's this little Galicia.
Here's this little thing. Galicia. Yeah. You wanted Galicia. Here's Galicia
I'll
for you.
I'll give it to you, okay? And for security guarantees and all kinds of bullshit. But the real reason would be to throw this nightmare, because all of the Ukraine nationals, all of the losers of this disaster will congregate there, is my thinking. And they will fester. Absolutely. And on top of that, NATO will think that that would be the perfect staging ground. They love staging grounds, don't they? Oof. To cause this Afghanization of the rest of Ukraine. Yeah. And so what will happen, my thinking, is Putin dangles this in front of the Poles. The Poles grab it.
They grab
Now,
it. Yes, of course,
different
yeah.
European groups don't like this, and that causes tension. Also within NATO, it causes tension. Hungary quietly takes its little bit that it wants.
Exactly.
Yeah, and what you have is let's just, to make it easy on a map, because we don't have a map in front of us, but we mentally do it easy. Everything to the east of the Dnieper River, and north of the Black Sea, the Russians take it as theirs. It's theirs and forever.
But that's for sure. Now it's for sure, considering what they are actually saying on the record.
Yeah,
Putin, Lavrov,
they're all,
Peskov. In fact, Novak, that Andrei was referring a few minutes ago, Novak actually said about that thing about the technicalities yesterday, even before Peskov. Peskov picked up what Novak had said. And Novak put it on a technicality
it's going in that direction.
Okay, look, basically, you're not going to get any gas. He said that very diplomatically, like a technocrat that he is.
Yeah, and so what happens is that you have a rump Ukraine focused on Kiev.
Yeah,
that does not extend all the way to Lviv, and the Lviv, Galicia. To look at it from your side, it goes to Poland. You have the Russian part, then you have Kiev and this western rump Ukraine, which is going to be a third of the size of the current Ukraine.
Absolutely.
And then a western Ukraine that goes to Poland, and that western Ukraine becomes this Vietnam for Poland. That's my thinking. It's been my thinking since
extremely possible. Extremely, it's a very good working hypothesis for all of us.
Yeah, it's a hypothesis, of course.
Yeah. No, it's a very plausible. I would say it would be the most plausible one, assuming the Russians, let's say, we're going to have as the French say, an état tampon, like a tampon between Novorossiya and Galicia.
Exactly.
Okay. And you can do anything you want with Galicia. You can incinerate, you can bomb it, you can, sodomize it, whatever. It's yours.
Some people have disagreed with me because they say, why would the Russians allow NATO to come that much closer?
As long as there is this no man's land in between, which will be rump Ukraine. I'm sure this is one of the scenarios. Yeah, this is one of the scenarios, Gonzalo. Certainly, I'm sure Patrushev has 7 or 8 different scenarios that he discusses with Putin all the time. There's no question about that. Yeah, he's a specialist on positioning. Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is one of the most plausible.
Yeah, because the notion of funding a viable underground partisan group in Eastern Ukraine is laughable. I mean,
it's laughable because they it's the same thing with the Taliban in Afghanistan. They won't have ground intel and ground support. Yeah. It's simple as that. Or like in the Triangle of Death in Iraq, they have less than 0 support by the local sheikhs. And that's
by the way, you're on top of just about every place in the world. So let me pivot the conversation. What the hell is going on in Iraq, of all places?
Oh my God, that's the Muqtada al-Sadr story, which pains me a lot because I followed Iraq for many years close by. I went there many times. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, we thought that Muqtada was an incorruptible scholar, political leader in the making. Mm-hmm. Especially in 2004, when practically single-handedly and surrounded by Sadrists, they were entrenched in the Imam Ali temple in Najaf, and they were about to be exterminated by the Americans. And who saved him? Ayatollah Sistani, which is the marjan, the source of imitation, the #1 Shiite authority in Iraq. So from that moment on, for many of us foreigners, wow, Muqtada, one day he's going to be the leader of an independent, free of occupation Iraq. The problem is, Gonzalo and all of you, which is something that I don't think this was reported in detail in Western media. Recently he struck a deal with the Saudis. Can you believe it? He is a Shiite. He went to Qom to study, in fact. He is a Shiite scholar, now religious semi-authority, and he strikes a deal with those Wahhabi fanatics of the House of Saud. Completely crazy. In terms of, okay, if I become leader, and in fact, he won the last elections in Iraq, so he would be the next prime minister, in fact, considering the results at the polls. And the Saudis were thinking, opa, so now we can have Iraq back on our sphere of influence, and then we can counterattack against Iran from Iraq. This is what MBS, of course, was thinking. And obviously, from the point of view of Muqtada al-Sadr, is corruption by virtually unlimited power. The problem is the whole thing backfired, because the other Shiite organizations in Iraq, including very, very important, the People's Mobilization Units, PMUs, including Hashd al-Shabi, the most important one. The number 2 of Hashd al-Shabi, he was killed with General Soleimani. That was the beginning of our decade, the beginning of what I call the Raging 20s. It started with a murder. And the Americans murdered General Soleimani, the most important military commander in the whole of West Asia at the time, and the number 2 of Hashd al-Shabi, Mohandes, which was, they were in the same car. And these guys are, let's say, protected by Ayatollah Sistani again. So it's fascinating, because Ayatollah Sistani is a religious authority, but he keeps re-emerging in key moments of Iraq modern history as the most important figure of them all, beyond all politics, and some of his proteges betray him, which was the case of Muqtada. So it's a very, I try to put it in 5 minutes, a very complicated story, but it pains all of us who were involved with Iraq to see that it would, something like that would happen. And with a guy that we thought was, wow, he went to Qom to study, he's not going to make these mistakes. He's going to behave like his model, which is Ayatollah Sistani. Not at all. But power, as we all know, power corrupts. Literally everything. So Iraq remains ungovernable, unfortunately. The system that the Americans devised, which is more or less the Lebanese system, divided in 3 ethnic groups fighting each other all the time. In the case of Iraq, Sunnis, Shiites, and Kurds cannot possibly work. It's impossible. And the Kurds, they don't care. The Kurds are over there in the mountains. It's even geographically, when you cross the border from Mesopotamia and you arrive in Kurdistan, you know that you are in another place. You know that you are
a foreign country.
Literally everything, including everything, the customs, their language, the food, etc. And of course their allegiances, their dodgy deals with Erdogan and the Turks, and their dodgy deals with the Americans and the Israelis as well. This has nothing to do with Baghdad and the south of Iraq, which is eminently Shiite. But that's the problem. It's divided between groups who are fighting each other all the time. It's so sad.
Yeah, because there's something I've been thinking about, and about the Middle Eastern situation. I get the sense that if the United States gets into another war, it will be in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, you touched a very interesting point, Gonzalo.
I don't think that they're happy with
you
MBS,
and for all of
they
us.
want to get rid of them.
For you and for all of us. Do you know what the CIA wanted?
What?
Let's say 6 years ago. They wanted to get rid of MBS and get their own guy.
Yeah.
Over there.
Yeah,
and
I forget the name of the other guy. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. I'm sorry, it escapes me now. I hope it will come back.
Chat, help us out. The name of
Chat,
the
help us out. Exactly. Prince whatever, exactly. It escapes
Like,
me now.
he's the
But
uncle of MBS, right?
Exactly, uncle of MBS, who was among the guys who were in jail at the Ritz-Carlton. Remember that story?
That was hilarious. That was hilarious.
Exactly. So this guy is the CIA point because he was in charge of intel and security. So
Right.
obviously he was the CIA guy. So we need our guy back. We cannot trust MBS, and especially afterwards when MBS was exchanging WhatsApps with Jared Kushner. The CIA was absolutely bonkers. We need to get our guy back, but in the end they never did because.
By the way, isn't it Mohammed bin Naif?
Yes. Yes, Prince Naif, as we call him. Yeah, Prince Naif. Thank you, guys. You're the best.
Thank you, Chad.
Absolutely, Prince Naif. So CIA point man over there. So this proves that even when the CIA has local intel at the highest level, not necessarily things happen the way they want it.
Yeah.
So which is something that we can extrapolate to Ukraine. It's not because they control the whole SBU that they're going to have the right guys at the right moment.
Yeah, exactly. Because my thinking about the Saudi Arabia situation is that MBS is carving out his own path. He's a very ambitious and very capable individual, and he sees where the wind is blowing, civilizationally speaking. He understands that his future lies with China and Russia, and he's making moves to de-dollarize, which must be making. I can tell you because I have some contacts in the Federal Reserve. It's freaking them out. I mean, they are really worried.
You're right.
Yeah,
and the big moment
in the Echoes building, in the Federal Reserve, they are freaked out. What?
Yeah, of course. No. Just to complement what you're saying, the freak out at the Federal Reserve complements the freak out in the Wall Street fire, as Michael Hudson say, system. The day when you have a Chinese envoy arriving in Riyadh saying basically, okay, from now on, it's you won or nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is something that is going to happen eventually. It can be in the next few months, in the next few years, but it will happen.
That's why I'm thinking that, a regime change in Saudi Arabia might be the next item on the state of play.
Well, from the point of view of the deep state, there's no question about it. They need their guy over there, and it's not MBS.
No.
And now they're really, really pissed with MBS because of what he's doing with OPEC. Because his dialogue with Putin is absolutely sterling, to say the least.
And they like each other. That's interesting.
They like each other. And of course, China. He has the best possible relationship with the Chinese. Yeah. And on top of it, behind the shadow play, or in the deep recesses of the shadow play of what happens in West Asia, there are Saudi emissaries that are talking to the IRGC. It's a very complicated negotiation.
Talking to who?
The Iranian Revolutionary Guards, IRGC, which, as we all know, terrorist organization.
I know that, wasn't there some talks that they were conducting in Vienna?
Yeah, of course.
Sort out their issues.
Of course, because they usually talk in Oman, because Oman is a sort of mediator between the Saudis and Iran. They also talk in Vienna, of course, Vienna, as we know, is the real diplomatic capital in the West. It's funny about Kazakhstan. You know what Nazarbayev wanted to do with Nur Sultan? He wanted Nur Sultan to become the diplomatic capital of Eurasia. And the whole thing fucked up because of the botched regime change operation, in fact. And because the story is very, 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 very dodgy, and it's complicated because my connections in Kazakhstan that I had were linked to the Nazarbayev universe. So every time that I asked them a question that was a little more, they never answered. So it's very complicated, and we don't know now what is the exact status of the Nazarbayev system with Tokayev as president. it's extremely complicated. Wow, this is okay. Everything in Central Asia is, for instance,
Byzantine.
yeah, but Byzantine with a Timurid, with the Timurid overtone. Okay, and Timur, the great thing about Timur is that he went straight to the point. Okay, I don't like this shit. Pyramid of schools right now. So he would do a pyramid of skulls in front of that. He did one in Bukhara, in fact. They still, it's fantastic. You talk to the old, they still remember this. The collective unconscious works just like when you, during the American invasion in Iraq, they were talking about the Mongols all the time. All the time. It's ingrained. It's one of the stories that they have at tea time at home. You know.
It's
fascinating.
Yeah. But my thinking is that the Americans will try for regime change in Saudi Arabia, and that would overturn the apple cart. Because if you have Saudi Arabia in internal political chaos, that's lights out for the global economy, I would think.
It is completely. Completely.
Because,
go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I just wanted to say that our industrial civilization, we are realizing it is far more fragile than we had understood. It's very easy for industrial civilization, which has brought us so many good things. It's very easy for the whole thing to go tits up. And the people who are in power now, they don't seem to realize it. You know what was shocking to me? I saw a public service announcement that was played in New York City, telling people there's been a nuclear war. Don't ask me how or why it happened, but there is, and there's been a nuclear attack. And so this is what you have to do. And I'm like, what the hell? They're toying with nuclear war. You know, the people who are running things, they are incompetent and completely cavalier about using the power that they have inherited. Because these people
incompetent and much worse, ignorant. Because they entertain the notion of a limited nuclear war. The idea of an American
acceptable losses.
An American first strike is to prevent. This is the way they think. An American first strike is to prevent a larger nuclear war, and they assume that the Russians will not retaliate with the best hypersonic missiles on the planet, which they won't even see destroying everything that they have. This is something that at least NATO understood. NATO now understands that. If you have zircon, if you have Kinzhals, etc., they can destroy all your airports and ports even before the war starts.
Yeah.
It's a matter of less than 5 minutes. You destroy all the major European installations immediately.
Yeah. And of course...
because the Americans are on the other side, no, we are protected. No, you're not protected against a zircon or a Kinzhal. No fucking way.
Anymore.
But they haven't, the neocons who don't, and if we ask Andrei, he's going to give us an absolutely fantastic answer. They don't understand shit about modern weapons, and especially hyper-modern weapons. The Americans cannot even build a decent hypersonic missile yet. Every test is an absolute disaster. The North Koreans, under the harshest sanctions in the history of humanity, maybe they can build a hypersonic missile before the Americans.
Hey, turning to something that I just saw in the chat, what do you think of Liz Truss as the new Prime Minister of England? God save the Queen.
Liz,
she's an idiot. Job. What?
No. The problem is for all of us who love women, it's such a pity that they are all women now.
Well, Sanna Marin, she's easy on the eyes,
Who?
Hang on, look. Sanna Marin, the Prime Minister of Finland, the
the Finnish party girl. Oh yeah, the Finnish party girl.
Yeah, she's very bangable.
If you met her on a rave in a open sauna in Helsinki, you would not say no. There's no question about that. But I'm thinking horribly about von der Leyen, about Annalena Grune, about.
Can I tell you something? Can I tell you something? I mean, this is just,
Yes.
it's just an anecdote, but you know what happens to me with Ursula von der Leyen?
Yes.
She looks exactly like my maternal grandmother. I mean, exactly like her, because my maternal grandmother was German Danish.
Yeah, right.
And so I look at Ursula and I'm like, Granny.
Granny, exactly. Oh, God.
That's my particular little hang up. It's the weirdest thing because they look exactly alike, and it's frightening. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, my grandmother is running Europe. What the fuck happened?
Well,
I know that that's ridiculous, but
I'm sure your grandmother would never imagine that a clone of herself would be as dangerous. Now,
oh yeah.
Did you see the story the past few days that a wolf ate von der Leyen's pony alive? And of course, our private joke is that, oh shit, mission failed. He got the wrong target.
But no, going back to Liz Truss, I look at that woman, and she is such an imbecile. And you ask yourself,
she's beyond if that's possible, she's beyond Annalena in terms of apparently, according to Tory staff who worked under her, they say that everything is right about her. She's mean, she's crass, she's arrogant, she's supremely ignorant, and she poses like she's the greatest thing since cottage cheese.
Yeah, and I asked myself, what the hell is going to happen to England? Because she's totally doubling down on the sanctions.
Exactly.
Russia must fail and all this bullshit.
So we have a doorknob rules the waves now. No?
Well, no, my thinking is that she is going to bite off more than she can chew. She's going to,
of course, because she's incompetent. But the people who run her, which are those the Eton, Cambridge, Oxford mob that runs the British establishment, a much better bet for them would be Ritchie, because Ritchie is one of them, but even if he's Indian, so he's the wrong color. So obviously, an Indian can never be a British prime minister. And he's a finance guy.
Yeah.
And he's wealthy as fuck. His wife has more wealth than the Queen of England. It's completely up. So he is one of them. Liz is an upstart, She's
How long do you think she'll last?
Not much, because General Winter is going to vote in a few months in Britain, and the only thing that will be working in Britain is the Premier League. Really, the only thing that, and if they didn't have the Premier League, they will already be in the streets. But at least they have, Cristiano Ronaldo, Anthony, who used to play in Brazil. Now he's the biggest miracle, beautiful story. The guy from a favela in São Paulo who arrives to play in Manchester United. And you have all those fantastic players from all over the world. So this is what the glue that keeps Britain together is the Premier League. Which, by the way, it's fascinating because there are no Brits. No?
They're all foreigners.
All the club owners are foreigners. All the good managers are foreigners, and all the best players are foreigners.
Yeah. I mean, taking a big step backward and looking at the whole picture on a macro level, it's like Europe committed suicide starting in 1914. There was the second 30 Years War between 14 and 45. I mean, that's how I would consider it.
No, you're right. It's one war.
Yeah, and after
30-year war. Yeah,
it's the second 30 Years War, and after 45, you had American vassalage, because basically, and it's becoming increasingly clear now how the Europeans are basically the tail, and the tail.
And how the EU was created, Gonzalo? The EU is an American invention.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole story of the EU. With those people, with Robert Schuman is like a demigod in Brussels.
And
he was an American agent. He was an American agent, essentially.
Right.
Try to have this discussion in Brussels. You get shot on the spot. Same thing.
Yeah, and they'll never admit that Interpol was invented by and created and established by the Nazis. They'll never admit that.
Anything. NASA. NASA. The best engineers were at NASA. Yeah, the whole thing, you know.
Never admit it. But the thing is, see, now, you know, we're coming on the winter of 2023, which is going to be catastrophic. I think that we're on the same page on that. And I don't think anybody seriously disagrees, for the simple reality that the amount of gas that Europe consumes cannot be fulfilled. Those needs cannot be fulfilled without Russia. It's impossible.
And everybody in the industry says it right away. Look, if you add up Norway, Algeria, Qatar, and Turkmenistan, it's still not enough.
Oh,
even if you had it, which you don't.
You don't. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I did not know that little fact. That's
very, very important. This is the stuff that you get from Persian Gulf energy analysts. You know, there are some very good ones, and there are some very good ones who are not ideologically biased. You know.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
they tell you what's really going on. It doesn't matter if it's anti-American, anti-Russian, anti-China. They don't give a fuck. They give you the stats. They give you the numbers. That, oh, this is what's happening. You know that thing in the Straits of Hormuz is like so. When coming back to something that we were discussing a few minutes ago, which is also very important in terms of bringing down the international financial system, there was a discussion even before the assassination of General Soleimani, that Iran, they had the ultimate poker card with them. If they close the Strait of Hormuz,
it's over.
It doesn't matter any reason. You know, if they close it for one day completely, the whole pyramid of derivatives would collapse in a matter of 24 to 48 hours. Yeah. You would have a barrel of oil reaching one of the projections is $1,000 a barrel.
Yeah.
So after that, you have that pyramid of derivatives completely collapse. So that's the collapse of the whole international financial system. You know, this is something I discussed with Michael a while ago, and he agreed completely. He said, "Yeah, this is
Michael Hudson."
Michael Hudson. Yeah.
I want to have him on.
You should have a round table between Michael and Hudson. And nobody else. 3 hours.
Just him.
Michael talking to Hudson, Hudson talking to Michael for 3 hours. Exactly. And then he will explain to you and to all of you, the audience, the intricacies of the FIRE system, the finance, insurance, real estate, which is the system that we live, and obviously the only possibility, which is something that the Chinese and the Eurasian Economic Union are trying to design, at least, and with BRICS Plus, assuming they can all get their act together, all these international organizations, which is a different system based on commodities, of course, based on gold to bypass the dollar, which is, of course, very important. We have to think about this in the horizon of the 2030s to the 2040s. This is a long-term process.
By the way, I put on screen some quip by Georgie. Least trust. Yes.
Oh, least trust is very, very good. Oh yeah,
least
it's much better than Least Strange Love.
Yeah,
Least Strange Love is like the name of a punk group, no?
Yeah. But least trust
is much better. Yeah.
Georgie, you won the point for tonight. That was a good one.
You won the point. You bet.
Yeah, thanks. But, you know, going back to this issue, I'm fascinated by how our industrial society has in itself the seeds of its own destruction. Yes. Because we have all of these women who have gone into the workforce, and so they're not having babies. And so the population of Europe has been collapsing, the United States as well. And they've supplemented their collapsing population with these imported people from the Middle East and from Africa who share nothing of the cultural background of the Europeans, who do not want to assimilate and become French or Dutch or German.
They refuse
British.
To assimilate.
They refuse to. Yeah. And so the issue becomes, you know, it's sort of like the Europeans, starting in 1914, they have committed this long suicide. That's how I see it. And I do not see at this point, you know, the issue of depopulation of the ethnic Europeans and their demographic collapse, and now this economic collapse. And by the way, I'm thinking that the immigrant populations are going to be the ones who cause the most civil havoc when there is no electricity and heating and food, because that seems to be what's coming up. And so I'm thinking to myself that
that's more complicated, Gonzalo, if you allow me.
sure,
Because we have to see the nuances. There, for instance, in France has an enormous Muslim population.
yeah,
Most of them, they are acculturated, more or less, even if they don't, they simply cannot follow all those very complex rituals of French society. It's a mess to master all that. And if you come from a non-Christian culture, it's absolutely impossible for you to master. First of all, to master the rituals, and second, to be accepted by les Français de souche, real Frenchmen, families that come back from the 10th, 12th century, to be accepted as one of them. You'll never be. So, and okay, let's say this is, and the middle class, they live in a mix of being accepted and acculturated, and at the same time, they live as outsiders as well. So let's say this is the majority. And then you have a fringe minority, which is very, very hardcore, very vocal, which are the guys who will never fit into French society, customs, mores, traditions, rituals, etc. So these are the people you are thinking that could cause major havoc. And there's no question, because first of all, they're going to say, now we have been discriminated forever by the French establishment, by the French police, which is something that happens every day. And now they want to starve us at all, as well. Yeah. There's no question. So then we're going to have stuff that starts in the les cités, the equivalent of the Brazilian favelas, the slums, in fact. And soon you're going to have it on the Champs-Élysées on Saturday night.
Yeah.
Easily,
Yeah, that's my concern.
It's quite possible. But France is a very special case. I don't see this happening in Germany, for instance. First of all, because most of the Muslim population is Turkish, and they are deeply entrenched. In Italy, because there's a small immigration from basically Black Africa and some from Northern Africa, and also in Spain. But I see in France a major problem, because the favelas in France, les cités, they are already exploding. And and on top of it, if they're going to be starved literally to death, then they will have nothing to lose,
Yeah, that's my thinking. That it would go tits up, because what has happened to Europe as a continent? I find it kind of like shocking. I can't quite believe that I'm living through this period, and it's so fascinating to me how in the last decade almost, especially in 14 and 15, when they let in this flood of immigrants and just open up the doors, that
they needed a reserve army, Gonzalo. Marx, basic Marx. They needed a reserve army, a cheap reserve army, and that's what they got. And to flatten salaries of Europeans as well. Don't forget, this is very,
that was the key issue.
That was the key issue, exactly.
Yeah.
In some countries, this was much more complicated than in others. Like in France, it's much more complicated than in Italy. In Italy, there was not indiscriminate immigration. Language problems. Very few people in Black Afro and the Muslim, they speak Italian, they learn Italian. France is different. Don't forget the former colonies.
All those Mali and all the rest of it.
Exactly. Yeah. But but the immigration from Southeast Asia, from former Indochina in France, they are hyper inside French society. They have their businesses. They are all middle class, or even some of them upper middle class. They wouldn't dream of coming back to Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. They love living in France. They go back for business. In fact, they do bilateral business. Therefore, Laosians doing business with Marseille or vice versa. But they prefer to live in France because of course, the welfare state, regulation, order, etc.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't see a future for Europe. I don't see a way out of this
Ah, no,
crisis.
you're right. In fact, this is Spengler, decline of the West, 10.0. This is
Yeah.
something more like Karl Kraus writing about the total disaster before the Nazism got to the top. It's something really apocalyptic. It's
Yes,
like
it is.
it's like a Breaking Bad remake of das Ring der Nibelungen.
Okay, so on this
Okay.
black pill, I'm going to call a closure to this delightful conversation. Pepe, don't go anywhere
Wonderful.
because I
Thank
want to
you.
show you something before you go.
Yeah. All
But
right.
chat, unfortunately, we're going to have to end the broadcast. It's been a delight. Pepe, thank you so much for coming. It's
Thanks,
always a pleasure.
Gonzalo, and thanks everybody. It's great talking to all of you. And
Yeah,
I wish I had more time to talk about
No.
having spiritual illuminations in the heart of the heartland. I felt like a kid
Yeah.
this past month.
No,
I
you'll
was
have to
like
come
a
again.
kid, a kid in an enormous candy store, and I said, "Man, I found the meaning of life. I'm gonna have an office in the middle of this caravanserai here. I put some Wi-Fi. I can have tea at 5 a.m. every day, and I'll be the happiest man in the world."
So also, I want to thank Andrei Martyanov for having joined us. And Andrei, I wish you the best. And I, of course, I hope to have Andrei on again. And you, Pepe, of course, I'd love
Thank
to have you on again. Chat, thank you so much. And I'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed the broadcast. Take it easy.
Thanks, everybody.